In the previous video, we introduced you to the key principles that every assembly monitor should keep in mind and respect to ensure effective human rights monitoring. In this video, we are going to walk you through the practical steps that monitors should follow in advance of any assembly monitoring activity, including gathering of background information, contacting relevant law enforcement authorities and the organizers, doing a security risk assessment, developing of a deployment plan, organizing a pre-deployment briefing, and preparing a grab bag for monitors. These are usually carried out by the organization or the person coordinating the actual monitoring exercise, potentially with the involvement of a security expert when needed. The scale of the preparation and organization very much depends on the nature of the assembly being monitored, the level of controversy or risk associated with the assembly, the attitudes of the authorities towards the assembly, the size of the monitoring team being deployed, and the experience of the monitors involved. The first step when planning a monitoring mission is conducting background research, which consists of general information about the assembly, legal and institutional framework review for a particular country, and previous policing challenges. This background research should be prepared in a document format that can then be used to develop the monitoring plan. The general information that should be collected in advance of the monitoring exercise includes the identity of the organizers, if identifiable, the main purpose and message of the assembly, the planned date as well as starting and finishing time of the assembly, the venue and route of the assembly, the expected number of participants, the legal status of the assembly, that is, whether or not it was notified or authorized, restrictions that have been imposed, if any, and any planned or potential protests against the assembly. We can collect this information online or by reaching out to the organizers and relevant authorities directly. Depending on the country, information on assemblies, including possible restrictions, might be displayed in public buildings or might be available online. As social media platforms are widely used for social activism and organization or coordination of assemblies on short notice, as monitors, we should follow these networks to be informed about upcoming assemblies. Municipal authorities and law enforcement agencies may also use social networks to convey important information about assemblies to the public. We should also establish and maintain contacts with a diverse network of civil society organizations, as this might be the best way of gathering advanced information on spontaneous assemblies and on assemblies without notification. Additionally, understanding the domestic legal framework within which the freedom of peaceful assembly is exercised and facilitated is essential for the success of any assembly monitoring exercise. In this regard, we should familiarize ourselves with the applicable legal and regulatory provisions on the definition of an assembly, the right to organize and participate in an assembly, the authorization or notification requirements and procedures, possible restrictions imposed and available remedies, the role of the organizer, engagement and communication by law enforcement officials with assembly organizers and participants, regulation and policing of spontaneous assemblies and counter-demonstrations, as well as peaceful blockades or other forms of civil disobedience, lawful use of force, arrest, dispersal, and other crowd management and de-escalation methods, including with respect to women, children, and persons with disabilities, recording and surveillance at public assemblies, access and restrictions for journalists and monitors, as well as the use of the internet and social media. Moreover, as monitors, it is important to have understanding about the role and structure of various national and local authorities in the facilitation of the freedom of peaceful assembly. Some relevant authorities could include the police, the Interior Ministry, or local self-government bodies like municipalities, and collection of relevant information from these institutions is recommended. Finally, the background research includes collecting information about previous policing challenges regarding assemblies organized by the same organizer as the assembly selected to be monitored, or with regard to assemblies focusing on similar issues or taking place at the same location. In this respect, it is helpful to establish and maintain contacts with regular organizers of public assemblies, and organizations working on the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. In order to increase awareness about the monitoring activity, it is a good practice for us to inform the assembly organizers and relevant law enforcement authorities about the assembly monitoring objectives and the main elements of our monitoring methodology before the assembly. When it comes to law enforcement authorities, contacting them provides a good opportunity to receive relevant information for the safety and security of the monitors. In addition, it helps in gathering information how the assembly will be policed. Such information could include the security measures that are put in place to protect the assembly, onlookers, or other members of the local community, any restrictions imposed on the assembly, the number and type of law enforcement units that will be involved in the facilitation of the assembly, the police equipment and crowd control tactics planned to be used in situations of disorder or violence, as well as the specific rules on photography or video recording of law enforcement action. Over time, as monitors, we might establish a positive working relationship with the authorities, and this might enable us to gain information as early as possible about notifications of assemblies, as well as about the outcomes of any meetings to resolve issues which might assist us in planning our monitoring. When it comes to reaching out to the organizer, if identifiable, this can help us build confidence and understanding about the monitoring work. Besides providing an opportunity to gather information about the legal status of the assembly, imposed restrictions and other details, a meeting with the organizer can serve as a good way to get the organizer's view about the facilitation of the planned assembly by the state authorities, about previous experiences regarding organizing assemblies, and about relevant challenges. Another thing that we should keep in mind when planning an assembly monitoring mission is doing a security risk assessment. As we discussed in the previous video on monitoring principles, as monitors, we need to be mindful of our own safety and security and should work as part of a team. We should not take unnecessary risks, and each monitor's personal safety should override all other considerations. Preparing for an assembly monitoring exercise, therefore, involves understanding the threats, identifying the associated security risks and their likely impact, and developing measures to mitigate them. For this purpose, we should develop a separate document focusing on security risk assessment, which will serve as a basis for the development of a security plan for monitoring. The security risk assessment consists of three elements. The first one is concerning the crowd. While the monitored assemblies are likely to start peacefully, there is always a potential risk that some might turn violent, and possible clashes with the police or between different groups cannot be excluded. We should therefore keep an eye on any changes in the mood of the assembly, the deployment of police with riot equipment, and police requests for participants to disperse. Additionally, we should look at data about past incidents, security measures, and crowd control tactics used by the police in connection with similar assemblies. The second thing that we should keep in mind is the assembly location and route. Ahead of the event, our monitoring team should visit the proposed site and walk the route of the assembly to be monitored. Additionally, we should always be aware of the exit route we might take if needed to leave the assembly in a hurry, the location of other monitors, and the location of the post-event meeting point, which should be identified ahead of the monitoring activity. The third thing that we should keep in mind is the police tactics and equipment use. A variety of options are usually available to the police when using force in the context of policing assemblies, including a number of police tactics that are more indiscriminate by nature, such as the use of water cannons or chemical irritants, which could be of greater danger to the health and safety of assembly monitors. It is important, therefore, for monitors to exercise utmost caution during the monitoring activities. In this regard, the monitors should be able to identify typical police tactics and equipment used for crowd control, know their designated use, and be aware of their potential health and safety impact in order to take the necessary precaution measures. For more information on security risk assessment, please see Module 4. The next important step that we should keep in mind when planning an assembly monitoring mission is the development of a deployment plan. Namely, based on the information collected through background research, meetings, and the security risk assessment, the monitoring coordinator should prepare a deployment plan, which is composed of a monitoring plan and a security plan. The monitoring plan includes the number of monitors, composition of teams, positioning of monitors, communication and use of monitoring equipment. Once we are aware of an upcoming assembly and its details, an assessment can be made on the number of monitors that should be deployed. There is no ideal number of monitors for an event. For larger and more complex events, any number of monitors can be deployed. In general, monitors should never work alone, and rather they should work in pairs or in small teams. When it comes to the composition of teams, all monitors deployed should be trained in assembly monitoring techniques and possess the necessary skills for safety and security awareness in the context of assemblies. As monitors, we should possess at least average level of fitness, as monitoring often requires long walks or running short distances. Pairing more experienced monitors with those with less experience will help facilitate peer learning as well as help ensure the safety and security of the teams. It is also a good practice to create gender-diverse monitoring teams. As monitors, we should position ourselves in a manner that allows us to observe both the protesters and the police or other authorities, without standing between them. Teams should spread out for optimum coverage. For safety reasons, especially during large assemblies, monitoring pairs should try to position themselves towards the front, sides and back of the assembly, so they can quickly and safely leave if the assembly turns violent. As monitors, we should record all key events and activities of the assembly, including the time and the key actors involved. We should carry our own notebooks, pens, watch, and if possible, an audio recording device for voice notes. Monitoring teams might also use still or video cameras, while mobile phones with cameras and voice recording can be very useful. If possible, we should turn on the date and timestamp while recording. In general, it is more effective if one team member does voice recording or takes written notes, while the other takes photos or short videos. The monitoring teams should agree on a means of maintaining communication with each other throughout the event. Depending on the need, some monitoring teams use walkie-talkies, some use mobile phones, while others rely on sight to keep in touch. Sometimes mobile phone networks can be unreliable, as they might become overloaded in the presence of large crowds, or when authorities try to close down the network for crowd control purposes. The monitors should therefore give consideration to other means of communication and agree on meeting points or other procedures to be followed in such cases. In addition to the monitoring plan, the deployment plan should include a security plan as well, which is based on the security risk assessment and covers the need for security expert or focal point, visibility and clothing of monitors, exit routes and meetup points, as well as the use of new technologies. The security risk assessment will determine if a security expert needs to be engaged to support the assembly monitoring teams on the ground. When this is not needed, it is useful to appoint one experienced assembly monitor as the security focal point for the entire team. In principle, monitoring should be carried out in a visible and transparent manner. In addition to carrying a monitoring ID, some monitoring teams wear more visible means of identification, such as jackets, team shirts, hats or armbands. However, due to safety reasons, we can decide to undertake monitoring in a more discreet manner. Nevertheless, we should always carry our monitoring ID. Clothing should also be chosen carefully. We should wear comfortable clothes and footwear and always be prepared for a variety of situations, including changes in weather or increases in the amount of time to be spent monitoring. Clothes should be made of natural fabric, as synthetic materials can catch fire and burn much more quickly. Monitors should refrain from wearing clothing with political messages or clothing which might make them resemble a protester or a law enforcement agent. The security plan should also include possible exit routes in case of disruption to public order or other potentially dangerous situations, as well as meeting points if monitors get separated from other members of the monitoring team, and for meeting up at the end of the event. In addition, as mentioned in the previous video, as monitors we should ensure the safety, security and confidentiality of our notes, electronic communications and other information, especially when these contain sensitive data. It is best to use secured messaging system for all monitors while in the field. However, the use of encrypted messaging and documentation might involve associated risk if they are considered suspicious in some jurisdictions, which the security assessment should take into account. The last important step that we should keep in mind when planning an assembly monitoring mission is the pre-deployment briefing. Namely, members of the monitoring team should arrange to meet in advance of the event for this pre-deployment briefing. Ideally, this will take place in an office, but in some circumstances, the meeting might have to take place near the location of the assembly. The meeting will be an opportunity for the coordinator to provide an overview of plans for the monitoring, to review the risk assessment, to establish teams, and to delegate responsibilities, as well as to ensure that all monitors have the necessary equipment. It is a good practice for monitors to carry the following items with them at all times: personal identification and monitoring badge, a mobile phone with relevant contact numbers, a camera and a voice recorder, a notepad, pens and a watch, a map of the assembly area and its surroundings, visibility items such as a hat, a vest or an armband, a copy of the code of conduct for monitors and basic information on the monitoring objectives and methodology, a first aid kit and protection against tear gas, protection against the sun and the rain, any necessary personal medication, as well as water in a plastic bottle, snacks, and some cash. Monitors should avoid taking with them anything that might be regarded as a weapon, such as a penknife or a glass bottle, as well as anything that can be seen as aggressive or dangerous, such as steel-toe boots or a mask, as well as irreplaceable personal items. In this module, we introduced you to the practical steps that monitors should follow in advance of any assembly monitoring activity. In this regard, as a monitor, you should remember to conduct background research consisting of general information on the assembly, the legal and institutional framework in a particular country, and the previous policing challenges, contact relevant law enforcement authorities and assembly organizers before the assembly in order to gather additional info and increase the awareness about the monitoring activity, develop security risk assessment, identifying the threats and associated security risks, as well as the measures to mitigate them, prepare a deployment plan composed of a monitoring plan and a security plan, and meet in advance of the assembly for a pre-deployment briefing and preparing a grab bag for monitors. In the next video, we will explain how to understand and interpret what you observe as a monitor during an assembly.